Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be on this remarkable spinning planet. I want to welcome you not merely to a presentation, but to a conversation perhaps that is long overdue, a conversation about the single most important project you will ever undertake, the architecture of your own life. There is an unwritten contract that each of us signs the moment we take our first breath. It is a silent, solemn agreement, not with society, not with our parents, not with any external authority, but with our own nascent potential. The fine print of this profound contract is elegantly simple, yet it contains the blueprint for all human achievement. It states that we have been given as a birthright the raw materials of greatness. We have been endowed with the intellect, the spirit, the will, and the precious finite resource of time to build a life of significance, a life of achievement, and most importantly, a life of profound and lasting fulfillment. But like any contract, this one contains clauses for default. And this, my friends, is where our urgent conversation must begin. We default on this sacred contract, not through grand, dramatic acts of betrayal, but through a slow, silent, almost imperceptible drift. We default on this contract when we allow our days to be governed by accident rather than by design, when we allow the precious hours to slip through our fingers like fine sand spent on trivialities that leave no mark. We default when we measure our own worth by looking at our neighbor's yard, at the curated illusions on a glowing screen, instead of diligently tending to our own garden. And we default, most tragically, when we live so far beneath our known capabilities that we begin to forget the sheer scale of the promise we once held. We settle into a comfortable valley and forget the existence of the mountain peaks that were once our intended destination. For the next half hour, I invite you to pull out that contract from the dusty archives of your soul. Let us examine its terms together. We are not here today to discuss superficial tricks or fleeting life hacks or the 7 easy steps to anything. Such things are a distraction. They are the equivalent of rearranging the furniture in a house with a crumbling foundation. No. We are here today to discuss the fundamental architecture of a well-lived life. We are here to examine the very bedrock upon which all else is built. The central, unshakable idea is this: the masterpiece you wish to create, your health, your wealth, your relationships, your legacy is and always will be an inside job. It begins not with what you have, but with who you are deciding to become. So let us begin the work. First, let us examine the terms of this contract more closely. What are these raw materials that we have been so generously given? The first is the human mind. Not merely the brain as a biological computer that solves problems, but the mind as a creative force. The mind is the architect's drafting table. It is the sanctum where the unseen is made visible, where the blueprint is drawn before the first stone is ever laid. Every bridge that spans a great river, every symphony that stirs the soul, every company that changes the world first existed as a single, persistent thought in a disciplined mind. Your mind has the capacity to build worlds or to construct prisons. The choice of what it builds is the first and most critical freedom you possess. It is the soil from which everything else grows, a theme we shall explore in great depth. The second raw material is the human will. The will is the master craftsman on the construction site of your life. The mind may draw the plans, but it is the will that lifts the heavy stones of action day after day. It is the will that chooses discipline over ease. It is the will that says no to the 1,000 distractions that call for your attention. It is the will that gets you out of bed on a cold, dark morning when your ambition is sleeping in. Without a trained and focused will, the most brilliant blueprint in the world is nothing more than a forgotten piece of paper. The will is the engine of creation. The third raw material is the human spirit. This is the unquantifiable element. It is the fire in the heart of the project. It is the source of resilience that allows you to continue when the will grows weary. It is the wellspring of your why, the deep, abiding purpose that fuels your journey. The spirit is what allows you to find meaning in the struggle, to see setbacks not as failures but as lessons, and to connect with something larger than your own immediate comfort. When the storms of life hit, and they will, it is the strength of your spirit that will keep the lights on in the house you have built. And finally, the fourth raw material, time. We are each given a finite amount of this precious currency. It is the one resource that cannot be bought, borrowed, or retrieved once spent. Time is the canvas. You can paint a masterpiece upon it, or you can allow it to be splattered with the mud of indecision and regret. How you invest your time is the ultimate indicator of what you truly value. These are the terms of our endowment: a creative mind, a disciplined will, a resilient spirit, and a finite canvas of time. The contract implies that this is more than enough. It implies that with these tools, anything is possible. So, if we are all signatories to this magnificent contract, why do we see a world where so many lives are marked by quiet desperation? Why do so many default? The reasons are not complex, but they are subtle and deeply seductive. The first great cause of default is the sedation of comfort. The comfort zone is the most dangerous place a person can live. It is not a place of attack. There are no obvious enemies there. Instead, it is a warm, soft, velvet prison. It smothers ambition with a blanket of good enough. It whispers seductive lies. It's too risky out there. Why bother? You have it okay right here. Maybe tomorrow. Comfort lulls our potential to sleep. It is the slow, painless poison that neutralizes the will to strive. The second cause of default is the deafening noise of the crowd. From the moment we are young, we are encouraged to find the well-trodden path, the safe path, the approved path. We are taught to look left and right to see what everyone else is doing and to adjust our own pace accordingly. We begin to float with the prevailing current, because to swim against it or to swim towards the shore of our own choosing requires immense effort and invites criticism. This external focus leads to the great plague of comparison, a poison that convinces you that your unique journey is somehow flawed because it doesn't look like someone else's. You forget that you are here to write your own story, not to be a character in someone else's. The third cause of default is the tyranny of the trivial. We live in an age of engineered distraction. Our attention, our most valuable asset, is hunted and harvested every second of the day. We become incredibly busy, rushing from one urgent but unimportant task to the next. We answer every buzz, every notification, every minor demand on our time. And at the end of the day, we feel exhausted, but we have made no meaningful progress on the grand project. We have spent all day laying bricks for other people's buildings, while the blueprint for our own lies rolled up in a corner, gathering dust. And perhaps the most profound cause of default is a fundamental misunderstanding of failure. We are taught to see failure as a verdict, a final judgment on our capabilities. You tried and you failed. Therefore, you are a failure. This is a catastrophic lie. Failure is not a verdict, it is data, it is a lesson. It is the feedback mechanism of the universe telling you, not that way. Try another. The person who is afraid to fail is a person who is afraid to learn. And a person who is afraid to learn is a person whose contract with potential has already been rendered null and void. Now, one might hear all of this and feel a sense of despair. But the purpose of this examination is not to lament, it is to diagnose. For once a diagnosis is clear, a cure can be prescribed. The cost of defaulting on this contract is simply too high to ignore. What is that cost? It is not merely the unachieved goals or the money not earned. The true cost is far deeper. It is the quiet, haunting melody of what might have been that plays in the back of your mind in your later years. It is the ache of unused capacity. It is the slow erosion of self-respect that occurs when you know deep down that you are capable of more, but you consistently choose less. When you break the promises you make to yourself, a part of you stops trusting yourself. And a life without self-trust is a life lived on unstable ground. The heaviest burden in life is not failure, but regret. So, how do we reverse the tide? How do we move from a state of default to a state of active, honorable engagement with our contract? It does not begin with a grand gesture. It does not require permission from anyone. It begins with a single, quiet, powerful event, a decision. A decision that the way things are is no longer an acceptable conclusion to your story. A decision to change your personal philosophy. A decision to stop being a thermometer that merely reflects the environment around you and to start becoming the thermostat that sets the environment. This decision is the turning point. It is the moment you stop being a passive character and pick up the author's pen. It is the moment the architect walks back to the drafting table and says, let's begin again, this time with intention. But a decision, no matter how sincere, is merely a wish without a method. A desire for a magnificent building is useless without the knowledge of architecture and engineering. You need a framework, you need a set of operating principles. This is why we must speak of disciplines. The word discipline often has a negative connotation. We think of punishment, of restriction. But the true meaning of discipline comes from the word disciple, a student of a craft. A discipline is not a punishment. It is a tool. It is a practice. It is a bridge that connects your grand vision to your daily reality. And that is the purpose of our journey together today. Having understood the contract, the materials, the reasons for default, and the decision to change, we must now unpack the architect's toolkit. We will explore a set of 10 foundational disciplines. These are not theories. These are the practical, powerful principles that allow you to honor your contract with your potential. We will explore the discipline of belief, for without a solid foundation, nothing can be built. We will explore the discipline of taking authorship of your life, of seizing the pen. We will discuss the disciplines of challenging your limits, of cultivating an unstoppable mindset, and of demanding a higher standard from yourself. We will delve into the disciplines of your mind, your standards, your relationship with fear, and your immunity to the poison of comparison. Each of these disciplines is a pillar that will support the structure of the life you wish to build. They are interconnected. They support one another. And when practiced together, they create a force of momentum that can transform any life, starting from any circumstance. So I invite you now, with a clear understanding of what is at stake, to proceed with me on this journey. This is not a lecture to be passively heard. It is a workshop for your own life. The contract is on the table. The tools are about to be revealed. The marble is before you, waiting for the first intentional strike of the chisel. The question is no longer what you are capable of. We have established that your potential is vast. The only question that remains is, what will you choose to build? Let us begin the work. In our previous discussion, we established the existence of a profound, unwritten contract each of us holds with our own potential. We explored the magnificent raw materials we are given, the mind, the will, the spirit, and time. And we concluded that the first step in honoring this contract is a conscious, deliberate decision. But a decision, my friends, is like a seed. A seed holds immense potential, but if it is cast upon barren rock, it will wither and die. For the seed of decision to germinate, grow, and flourish, it must be planted in fertile soil. That soil is self-belief. This brings us to the first and arguably the most foundational of all the disciplines, the power of believing in yourself. Before a skyscraper can pierce the clouds, its foundations must be driven deep, deep into the bedrock. No sane architect would ever approve the construction of a magnificent structure on loose sand or unstable ground. It would be an act of catastrophic foolishness. The time, the resources, the efforts spent on the gleaming tower above would all be for naught because the invisible work below was neglected. The strength of the visible is always, without exception, determined by the integrity of the invisible. And yet, how many of us attempt to build a magnificent life, a life of financial success, of meaningful relationships, of vibrant health upon the shifting sands of self-doubt and insecurity? How many of us sketch out brilliant blueprints in our minds only to abandon them because deep down we don't believe we are worthy of laying the first stone? Your belief in yourself is that bedrock. It is the unseen, unglamorous, yet absolutely essential foundation upon which every tangible achievement you will ever experience must be built. It is the silent force that holds everything else up when the inevitable storms of life begin to rage. Now, it is critical that we begin with a clear and precise definition. The term self-belief is often misunderstood, confused with its loud, insecure cousins. So let us first clear the ground and define what self-belief is not. Self-belief is not arrogance. Arrogance is a mask worn to hide deep insecurity. It is a performance for an external audience. Arrogance is comparative. Its very existence depends on the belief that one is superior to another. Arrogance proclaims, "I am better than you." It is brittle, it is loud, and it is fragile. It shatters at the first sign of genuine criticism or failure. Self-belief, on the other hand, is not a performance. It is a quiet internal state of being. It is not comparative, it is creative. It is not concerned with being better than others, it is concerned with becoming better than it was yesterday. True self-belief whispers, not to the world but to itself, "I have the capacity to learn, to adapt, and to grow. I am capable of figuring this out." Arrogance needs applause. Self-belief needs only a challenge. Furthermore, self-belief is not mere hope or wishful thinking. Hope is passive. Hope waits for the external world to grant permission. Hope says, "I really hope things work out." It places the power outside of itself. Belief is active. Belief grants its own permission. Belief says, "I will work until things work out." Hope is a lottery ticket. Belief is a business plan. It is the profound internal conviction in your own agency, your ability to influence outcomes through your own disciplined effort. So, if belief is not arrogance and it is not hope, what is it? Self-belief is a structure. I want you to hold on to that word. It is not an emotion. It is not a mood. It is not a personality trait you are born with. It is a structure that you build within your own mind. And like any structure, it is built brick by brick, day by day, through a deliberate process. This leads us to the most important question of our entire discussion today. If self-belief is a structure, how do we build it? Especially if we are starting from a place of deep and chronic self-doubt. The answer is simple in principle, but it requires the utmost discipline in practice. You build belief through the accumulation of irrefutable evidence. Your mind, particularly your subconscious mind, is not a philosopher. It is a meticulous accountant. It does not respond to your affirmations unless they are backed by deposits of proof. You can stand in front of a mirror and say, "I am confident," 1,000 times, but if your actions throughout the day are those of a person who lacks discipline and integrity, your subconscious mind simply looks at the ledger, sees no corresponding deposits, and dismisses your words as a fraudulent transaction. It trusts the evidence of your actions, not the echo of your word. So, the work is to become a relentless gatherer of evidence. You must provide your own mind with undeniable proof that you are who you say you want to be. And you start with the smallest possible denomination of proof. You build the foundation of belief by keeping the promises you make to yourself. Let me repeat that. The entire edifice of authentic, unshakable self-belief is built upon this one simple practice. Keeping the promises you make to yourself. Let us call this the practice of making personal integrity deposits. Think of your self-worth as a bank account. Every time you tell yourself you are going to do something and you do it, you make a deposit. Every time you fail to do it, you make a withdrawal. A person with chronic self-doubt is a person with a chronically overdrawn account. They have made so many withdrawals, so many broken promises to themselves that their account is bankrupt. They have no trust capital left with themselves. Our task is to rebuild that account one small deposit at a time. What do these deposits look like? They are not grand, heroic gestures. The bankrupt account cannot afford grand gestures. They are the small, unglamorous, daily acts of discipline. If you tell yourself, "Tomorrow I will wake up at 6 a.m. instead of 6:30, the act of that alarm going off and your feet hitting the floor is not just about gaining 30 minutes. It is a powerful deposit. You are providing evidence. The ledger in your mind reads, "He said he would do it, and he did it." Entry logged. If you promise yourself, "I will read 10 pages of a good book today," the act of sitting down and reading those pages, even when you're tired, is another deposit. Entry logged. If you commit to taking a 20-minute walk during your lunch break, and you do it, that is another deposit. Entry logged. Do you see the power in this? These actions are so small that they are almost impossible to fail at. Yet they are so powerful because they begin to reverse the flow of evidence. You are consciously and deliberately creating a new track record of personal integrity. You are proving to your own mind that your word has value. As your account grows, you can start making larger deposits. I will stick to my workout plan for 30 consecutive days. I will finish this project at work 2 days before the deadline. I will refrain from complaining for 1 full week. Each promise kept is another layer of concrete being poured into your deadline foundation. Over time, something miraculous happens. The compounding effect of these deposits begins to take hold. Your small, consistent actions build a reserve of self-trust that is so vast, so robust, that you begin to change from the inside out. You stop hoping you can do things, and you start knowing you can, because you have a ledger full of evidence that proves you are a person who follows through. The consequences of building this structure are profound, and they manifest in 2 realms, the internal and the external. Internally, your entire inner dialogue begins to shift. The inner narrator, that voice in your head that provides commentary on your life, changes its tone. For the person with a bankrupt account, the narrator is a critic. It says, "You can't do that. Remember the last time you tried? You're not smart enough. You're going to fail." But for the person who has been making consistent deposits, the narrator becomes a coach. It says, "This is difficult, but you are a person who handles difficult things. You have a history of following through. Let's break this down and get it done." This internal shift from critic to coach is the single greatest psychological advantage a person can have in life. Externally, the world begins to respond to you differently. People are intuitive. They can sense the difference between the brittle shell of arrogance and the solid core of authentic belief. When you walk into a room, when you speak in a meeting, when you negotiate a deal, you radiate a calm, quiet authority that is not based on your title or your clothes, but on the unshakable foundation you have built within yourself. You stop seeking validation from others because you have already validated yourself through your actions. Opportunities begin to flow towards you, not because you are lucky, but because the world has a way of entrusting its great challenges to those who have proven they can be trusted with small ones. This brings us to the ultimate purpose of the foundation: to withstand the storm. Life is not a calm, sunny afternoon. Life is a series of seasons, and winter will inevitably come. The economy will turn, a business will fail, a relationship will end, criticism will find you. Adversity is not a possibility, it is a statistical certainty. In those moments, a person without a foundation of self-belief is shattered. Criticism from a boss or a stranger is not heard as feedback. It is heard as a final verdict on their self-worth, and it confirms their deepest fears. A failure in business is not seen as a market lesson. It is seen as a personal indictment. They are a tree with shallow roots, toppled by the first strong wind. But the person who has done the invisible work, who has built the structure, experiences the storm differently. The wind still howls, and the rain still falls, but they are anchored to bedrock. When criticism comes, they can listen to it objectively. They can extract the useful data without allowing it to dissolve their sense of self, because their self-worth is not up for negotiation. It has been forged in the fire of 1,000 kept promises. When they experience failure, they do not say, "I am a failure." They say, "The strategy was a failure. The approach was flawed. I am the person capable of finding a new one." Their belief is not in a specific outcome, but in their own capacity to endure, to learn, and to begin again. This is the ultimate freedom. Not the freedom from difficulty, but the freedom to face any difficulty, knowing that the core of you will not be broken. So, as we conclude this first most critical discipline, I ask you to look honestly at your own foundation. Is it built on the solid rock of evidence of 1,000 promises kept, or is it built on the shifting sands of hope, of good intentions, of a word that is not yet your bond? The work begins today, not with a grand declaration, but with a single, small, almost trivial promise that you will make to yourself and that you will keep. Choose one thing: waking up, reading, walking, one small act of integrity. That is the first brick. Tomorrow you will lay another, and the day after that another. You will not feel the change overnight, but one day, months or years from now, a great storm will come into your life. And as it rages, you will find yourself standing firm, not because the storm is weak, but because you, without even realizing it, have become unshakable. For you have done the work, you have built the structure, you have honored the first clause of your contract, you have built the foundation of belief upon which a truly magnificent life can and will be built. We have now laid the cornerstone. We have established that the entire structure of a life well lived must be built upon the solid bedrock of self-belief, a belief that is not wished for but constructed brick by brick through the discipline of keeping the promises you make to yourself. We have turned inward and begun the essential work of building the foundation. Now, with that foundation secure, with the ground beneath our feet firm and unshakable, we can finally lift our gaze. We can ask the fundamental question of creation: what shall we build upon it? A foundation, no matter how strong, is useless if nothing is built. It is a prelude to a story that is never told. This brings us logically and powerfully to our second discipline. Be the author of your life. I want you to consider a profound and challenging metaphor. Imagine your life as a grand, epic novel. Every day that passes, a new page is written. Every year that concludes, a new chapter is completed. The collection of these chapters will one day become the finished story of your time on this earth. Now I ask you a question of the utmost importance, a question upon which everything else hinges. Who is holding the pen? In this grand novel of your existence, are you the author, deliberately and consciously choosing the plot, developing the main character, which is you, and writing a narrative of purpose, intention, and meaning? Or, if you are brutally honest with yourself, have you been living merely as a character, reacting to a plot that was written for you by someone else? Let us first examine the life of the character. It is the default setting for most of humanity, and so it is a life we all understand. The character wakes up when an alarm clock set by an employer commands it. The character's day is defined by a script written by others, the agenda of their boss, the demands of their clients, the expectations of their family. They react to emails. They respond to requests. They navigate scenes and dialogues they did not create. They feel the emotions of the plot: stress, frustration, fleeting moments of happiness, but they feel a distinct lack of control over the narrative itself. The character often waits. They wait for Friday. They wait for a vacation. They wait for a promotion to be given to them. They wait for someone else to recognize their worth. They wait for the next chapter to begin, hoping it will be more exciting than the last, without ever realizing that they themselves are meant to write it. The life of the character is a life of reaction, of passivity, of being an effect rather than a cause. It is a life of quiet desperation, spent reading a story that one feels increasingly disconnected from, because at a soul level, you know it is not the story you were meant to live. Now, let us contrast this with the life of the author. The author does not wait for the story to happen. The author decides what the story will be about. The author takes full and complete ownership of the narrative. This does not mean they control every event. The world will always introduce unexpected plot twists. But the author controls the meaning given to those events and, most importantly, the response of the main character. The life of the author is a life of intention, of proactivity, of being a cause. It is the conscious and deliberate act of taking up the pen every single day and choosing the direction of your own story. The transition from character to author is the single most significant transformation a human being can undergo. It is the move from dependence to sovereignty. It is the acceptance of what is perhaps the most terrifying and exhilarating responsibility in the universe, the responsibility for your own life. The foundation of belief we discussed in our first chapter is the prerequisite for this. You cannot dare to take the pen until you believe you are worthy of writing the story. So, How does one make this transition? How does an author truly begin to write? The work of the author can be broken down into three fundamental ongoing acts. The first act is to define the plot. A story without a plot is not a story. It is merely a sequence of random events. A life without a clear vision is not a life, it is a sequence of random days. The first and most crucial task of the author is to decide with as much clarity as possible what the grand theme of their story will be. Many people mistake vague desires for a plot. I want to be successful, I want to be happy, I want to be rich. These are not plots, these are lazy wishes. They provide no direction. An author cannot simply write a successful book. They must decide, is this a story of adventure and exploration, a story of love and connection, a story of building something of lasting value, a story of service and contribution, a story of overcoming great adversity? To define your plot, you must engage in the lost art of solitude and deep reflection. You must be willing to turn off the noise of the world, the opinions, the expectations, the endless stream of distractions, and ask yourself the big questions. What truly matters to me at my core? What problems in the world stir my spirit? If I were to become the hero of my own story, what would that hero stand for? What character arc must I undergo to become that person? This process is not about finding a job title. It is about defining your purpose. Your plot is your why. It is the North Star that will guide every decision you make. This does not mean you need to have every detail of the next 40 years mapped out. A great author often discovers the story as they write it, but they always have a clear sense of the destination. The vision acts as a compass, not a rigid map. It allows you to navigate the unexpected twists and turns of life without ever losing your ultimate direction. Without this clearly defined plot, your life will lack coherence. You will be pulled in 1,000 different directions, and your story will be a confusing mess of unfinished chapters and abandoned subplots. Take the time to be a thoughtful author. Define the story you want to tell. Once the plot has been defined, we move to the second act of authorship, which is perhaps the most challenging. You must write the daily pages. A 1,000-page epic is not written in a single heroic burst of inspiration. It is written word by word, sentence by sentence, page by page, day after day, often when inspiration is nowhere to be found. The great lie that the character believes is that action should only be taken when one feels motivated or inspired. The great truth that the author lives by is that the professional shows up and does the work regardless of their mood. Action is not a consequence of motivation, it is the cause of it. The quality of your life's novel will be determined by the quality of its pages. And the pages are your days. The grand vision you defined in the first act will remain a fantasy unless you translate it into the small, concrete, disciplined actions you take today. A page is a single, meaningful unit of progress. It is the one difficult phone call you have been avoiding. It is the 1 hour of deep, focused work on your most important project. It is the 30 minutes of exercise you commit to. It is the one honest and vulnerable conversation with someone you love. Your life is not transformed by future events. Your life is the accumulation of these daily pages. The author understands the law of process. They do not get overwhelmed by the sheer size of the book they are writing. They focus only on writing today's page and writing it well. They know that if they write a good page today and another good page tomorrow and another the day after that, the chapters will take care of themselves. And eventually the book will be written. This is where so many people fail. They have a dream, a plot, but they are unwilling to engage in the monotonous, unglamorous daily work of writing the pages. They are waiting for a magical shortcut, a plot twist where they suddenly arrive at the final chapter without having to write the middle, but there is no shortcut. The middle of the book is where the character is forged. The daily pages of struggle, of discipline, of consistent effort, that is the story. That is the entire point. Do not despise the small daily disciplines. They are the ink in your pen. Without them, your story will remain unwritten, your vision forever, a blank page. This brings us to the third, and perhaps the most sophisticated act of authorship. You must learn to edit ruthlessly. A novice writer believes that good writing is about adding more words. An experienced author understands that great writing is often about what you take away. The most powerful tool an author possesses is not the keyboard, but the delete key. A great story is defined as much by what is left out as by what is put in. To be the author of your life, you must become a ruthless, courageous editor of your own manuscript. You must constantly review your life and be willing to cut out the parts that do not serve the main plot, your vision. What do you edit? First, you edit unnecessary characters. There may be people in your life, friends, colleagues, even family, who, for whatever reason, drain your energy, mock your ambition, or sow seeds of doubt. They are characters who do not belong in the story you are trying to write. A courageous author must be willing to write these characters out of the script, or at least significantly reduce their role. This is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of narrative integrity. You cannot write a story of triumph if you are surrounded by a cast of cynics. Second, you edit weak subplots. A subplot is a habit, a commitment, or a distraction that consumes your time and energy but does not move the main story forward. This could be endless hours spent on social media, binge-watching meaningless television, engaging in gossip, or maintaining commitments you made years ago that no longer align with your plot. The author must look at every subplot and ask a hard question: does this serve the story I am trying to tell? If the answer is no, it must be edited out. This requires the courage to say no to invitations, to requests, and to your own weakest impulses. Every yes to a weak subplot is a no to your main plot. Third, you edit poorly written sentences. These are the inefficient actions, the sloppy habits, the ways you work and live that are simply not effective. The author constantly refines their craft. They ask, is there a better way to do this? Am I working on the most important thing, or am I just busy? Is this action producing the result I want? They are willing to delete old ways of doing things to make room for more effective ones. This act of editing is perhaps the most difficult because it involves letting go. It involves creating empty space. But it is in that empty space that the real story has room to breathe and grow. So this is the work, the continuous three-act process of authorship. You define your plot with clarity, you write your daily pages with unshakable discipline, and you edit your manuscript with ruthless courage. This is not a one-time event. You do not simply write a vision statement and then you are done. You are the author for life. Every day you wake up and you pick up the pen. Some days the writing will flow. Other days you will face the terror of the blank page, what we call procrastination or writer's block. On those days, the professional author doesn't quit. They simply lower the bar. They commit to writing one sentence, just one. And often, that one sentence is enough to get the ink flowing again. Your life is a living manuscript. You can start a new chapter right now, today, regardless of what has been written before. The past is the prologue. It has context, it has lessons, but it does not have to dictate the rest of the story. You have the pen in your hand. The belief you built in the first discipline gives you the confidence to write. This second discipline gives you the method. It is the framework for a life of intention. A life where you are the cause, not the effect. Where you are the writer, not just the reader. This is your story. No one else can or will write it for you. It is the greatest creative opportunity you will ever be given. Do not let it go to waste. Pick up your pen and begin to write the masterpiece you were born to create. We have now established two monumental pillars in the architecture of a well-lived life. First, the foundational bedrock of self-belief, built not on hope, but on the hard-won evidence of promises kept to oneself. Second, the declaration of sovereignty that comes from taking up the pen and becoming the author of your own life, defining your plot, writing your daily pages, and editing your manuscript with courage. But once the author has defined a compelling plot, a new and critical mandate arises. A story in which the main character begins on page 1 and ends on page 500, completely unchanged, is not a story at all. It is a failure of the narrative. The entire purpose of a journey, the entire reason for a plot, is the transformation of the protagonist. The character must grow, they must evolve, they must become more than they were at the beginning. And so it is with you, the main character in your own epic novel. For your story to have meaning, you must grow. This is not an optional subplot. This is the main plot. And growth, true growth, does not happen by accident. It is not a function of time passing. It is the direct result of a conscious, deliberate, and often uncomfortable process. This brings us to the heart of our third discipline. Challenge your limits, not your essence. I ask you to consider the humble rubber band. Lying on a desk, it is a thing of little consequence. Its potential is dormant. Its purpose is unrealized. It is only when it is picked up and stretched that its true nature is revealed. Its value is a direct function of its tension. It is useless until it is stretched. You, in your potential, are much the same. Your growth, your progress, your evolution as a human being does not happen in the tranquil harbor of your comfort zone. It happens out on the turbulent waters, at the very edge of your current abilities. It happens in the space where you are being stretched. But here, we arrive at a critical junction, a place where so many ambitious and well-intentioned people take a wrong turn, leading them not to sustainable growth, but to burnout, anxiety, and self-loathing. And that is the profound difference between challenging your limits and challenging your fundamental essence. Let us explore these two paths, for they lead to entirely different destinations. The first path is the path of challenging your essence. Let us call this the path of the grinder. The grinder's motivation stems from a place of self-rejection. Their internal monologue is, I am not good enough as I am. I am flawed. I am lacking. Therefore, I must grind myself down. I must punish myself with effort. I must obliterate my current self in the hopes that a better one will emerge from the dust. The grinder wages a war against themselves. They see sleep as a weakness, rest as a sin, and relentless punishing effort as the only path to worthiness. Their work is fueled by a fear of being inadequate. They are constantly pushing, forcing, and straining, not out of a love for the process, but out of a distaste for who they currently are. This path is paved with stress, comparison, and the constant nagging feeling that no matter how much they achieve, it will never be enough to fix the fundamental flaw they perceive in themselves. It is an unsustainable, joyless, and ultimately destructive way to live. It is the path of stretching the rubber band until it inevitably snaps. Now, let us consider the second path, the path of challenging your limits. Let us call this the path of the explorer. The explorer's motivation stems from a place of self-acceptance and profound curiosity. Their internal monologue is, I am whole and sufficient as I am right now. And from this place of sufficiency, I am deeply curious to discover what more I am capable of. The explorer does not wage a war against themselves. They enter into a partnership with their own potential. Their effort is fueled not by fear, but by a sense of adventure. They see the edge of their ability not as a painful indictment of their inadequacy, but as an exciting frontier waiting to be mapped. Their journey is one of discovery, not of punishment. This path is sustainable, it is often joyful, and it leads to authentic, lasting growth. It is the path of intelligently and respectfully stretching the rubber band, feeling the tension, and thereby expanding its capacity. Before you take another step on your journey of personal development, you must choose which path you will walk. Will you be the grinder at war with yourself, or will you be the explorer in partnership with your potential? Your answer to this question will determine everything. Assuming you have chosen the path of the explorer, our next task is to understand the terrain. Before we can challenge our limits, we must first understand their anatomy. What is a limit? It is not, as many believe, a permanent wall. A limit is simply the current, observable edge of your demonstrated capacity. And limits generally come in three forms. The first are skills-based limits. These are the most straightforward. This is the how-to knowledge you have not yet acquired. You cannot yet speak Spanish. You do not yet know how to code a website. You have not yet learned how to effectively negotiate a contract. These limits are overcome through the deliberate acquisition of knowledge and the practice of application. They are the most visible and often the easiest to address. The second and far more common are comfort-based limits. This is the vast territory of things you are perfectly capable of doing, but are currently unwilling to do because they provoke feelings of fear, awkwardness, or discomfort. This is the fear of public speaking, the hesitation to introduce yourself to a stranger at a networking event, the discomfort of having a difficult but necessary conversation. This is the invisible fence of your comfort zone. It is not a lack of skill that holds you back, but a lack of courage to endure a temporary emotional state. The third and most insidious are belief-based limits. These are the glass ceilings you have installed in your own mind. They are the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what is possible for you. I'm not a natural leader. I'm not the creative type. People from my background don't achieve that kind of success. These are not objective realities. They are conclusions you have drawn from past experiences, and they have become part of your identity. These limits are the most powerful because you rarely think to question them. They are the water the fish swims in. Challenging these limits requires you to question the very evidence you have used to construct your sense of self, which is why the foundation of belief we built in Chapter 1 is so essential. So, as an explorer, your work is to map your own frontiers, to identify your skills-based, comfort-based, and belief-based limits. And once you have identified them, you begin the process of strategic expansion. This is not a haphazard process. It is governed by 4 key principles. The first principle is the law of gradualism. You do not conquer a great mountain in a single heroic leap. You do it one steady, deliberate step at a time. Growth happens at the margin, not in a violent explosion. The explorer respects this law. If their limit is running 1 mile, they do not attempt to run a marathon the next day. They attempt to run 1 mile and 1 step, then 1 1/10 of a mile. They apply gentle, consistent pressure at the edge. This is the principle of the 1% improvement. Small, seemingly insignificant advances, when compounded over time, lead to breathtaking transformations. Giant leaps often lead to injury and retreat. Small steps lead to sustainable progress. The second principle is the embrace of productive discomfort. There is a specific feeling associated with optimal growth. It is the feeling of being stretched but not strained. It is the sweet spot where you are operating just outside the edge of your comfort zone, but not so far outside that you are overwhelmed by panic or stress. A musician learning a new piece feels this when they attempt a passage just slightly faster than they can play it perfectly. An athlete feels it when they lift a weight that is challenging but manageable. The explorer learns to recognize this feeling of productive discomfort and to see it as a signal. It is the feeling of growth itself. They learn to lean into it, to befriend it, knowing that it is the fertile ground where their new capacities are being born. The third principle is the intelligent reframing of failure. The grinder, who is at war with themselves, sees failure as a devastating loss. It confirms their deepest fears of inadequacy. But the explorer has a completely different relationship with failure. For the explorer, failure is not a sign that they have reached their ultimate permanent limit. Failure is simply a clear, unambiguous signal that they have found their current limit. It is not a wall. It is a marker. It is a navigational beacon. When you attempt to lift a weight and fail, you have not failed as a person. You have succeeded in discovering the exact present boundary of your strength. That is incredibly valuable data. Failure for the explorer is not an indictment. It is information. It is the GPS system for growth, telling you precisely where you are on the map of your potential. The fourth, and often most neglected principle, is the necessity of recovery. A muscle that is stretched must be allowed to heal in order to grow stronger. A mind that has been pushed to its cognitive limits must be allowed to rest in order to integrate the new information. The grinder sees rest as a form of weakness. The explorer understands that recovery is an active and essential part of the growth process itself. Deliberate rest, adequate sleep, and quiet reflection are not time off from the work. They are part of the work. It is in these periods of recovery that the expansion of your limits is solidified. To constantly challenge without recovering is to stretch the rubber band over and over again without ever letting it rest. Eventually, it will lose its elasticity and snap. These are the principles of the explorer. You use gradualism to take small, consistent steps. You learn to embrace the feeling of productive discomfort as your guide. You reframe failure as valuable navigational data. And you honor the necessity of recovery as a vital part of the process. When you adopt this mindset, your entire relationship with life changes. Life is no longer a series of threats to be avoided or a test you are afraid of failing. It becomes a grand laboratory for discovery. Every challenge becomes an interesting experiment. Every setback becomes a lesson. You begin to develop a deep, abiding curiosity about your own potential. You live on your own frontier, and you find a deep sense of meaning and excitement in the process of exploration itself. This is the character arc. This is the transformation that makes your story worth telling. The author, from chapter 2, does not just write about a static character. The author writes a story that requires the character to grow, and then the character you engage is in the discipline of that growth. So, as we conclude our exploration of this third discipline, the invitation is to change your perspective. Stop seeing your limits as a cage and start seeing them as a horizon. Stop punishing yourself for not being further along and start partnering with your potential in a curious and intelligent way. Choose one limit, just one, a small, comfort-based limit. The conversation you've been avoiding, the new skill you've been meaning to learn, the small public speaking opportunity you've been shying away from. Approach it not as a grinder with fear and self-criticism, but as an explorer with curiosity and a sense of adventure. Apply the law of gradualism. Take one small step, lean into the productive discomfort, and know that whatever the outcome, you have succeeded because you have engaged in the process of growth. You have stretched, and that is the entire point. We have now journeyed through 3 foundational disciplines. We began by laying the bedrock of self-belief, a structure built from the hard evidence of promises kept. From there, we took up the author's pen, claiming sovereignty over our own life's narrative by defining our plot and writing our daily pages. And most recently, we embraced the path of the explorer, committing to the intelligent and courageous work of stretching our limits, not to punish our essence, but to discover the vastness of our own potential. This brings us to an inevitable and crucial consequence of the explorer's path. When you make the decision to live on the frontier of your abilities, when you deliberately step outside the tranquil harbor of your comfort zone, you are issuing a guarantee. You are guaranteeing that you will encounter resistance. You are guaranteeing that you will face obstacles, that you will meet with uncertainty, and that you will be knocked down. The path of growth is, by its very definition, a path of friction. This presents a paradox. To grow, we must seek the very challenges that are designed to stop us. The central question then is not if you will face obstacles, but how you will face them. What is the internal operating system required to navigate this challenging terrain without surrendering? This question leads us to 2 fundamentally different philosophies of life, 2 opposing pursuits. And the one you choose will determine the trajectory of your entire journey. The first is the pursuit of invincibility. The second is the cultivation of unstoppability. And this is the heart of our 4th discipline. Cultivate unstoppability, not invincibility. Let us first dissect the great myth of invincibility. It is one of the most seductive and paralyzing traps in the world of personal achievement. The pursuit of invincibility is the desire for a perfect plan. It is the craving for a guaranteed outcome. It is the search for a path that is free of risk, of failure, of pain. The person seeking invincibility wants to be bulletproof. They want to enter the battle with an impenetrable suit of armor, assured of victory before the first arrow is ever fired. Psychologically, this desire is rooted in a deep fear of uncertainty and a terror of being seen as a failure. The person pursuing invincibility becomes a master strategist, but a poor warrior. They spend their days in the war room, endlessly analyzing maps, calculating odds, and trying to predict every possible move of the enemy. They create complex business plans. They read another 10 books. They wait for the economy to be just right. They wait until they have enough money, enough knowledge, or enough confidence. They are waiting for the perfect, risk-free moment to begin. But the universe does not offer such moments. The perfect plan is a fantasy. The guaranteed outcome is an illusion. The strategist in their quest for invincibility, becomes paralyzed by their own analysis. They are so afraid of making a wrong move that they make no move at all. Their life becomes a masterpiece of preparation for a journey they never take. Their quest for a flawless strategy becomes the very thing that guarantees their defeat. For the game of life is won not in the planning, but on the field of action. To wait for certainty is to wait forever. Now, let us contrast this flawed pursuit with the profound reality of unstoppability. If the person seeking invincibility is the armored knight waiting for a guaranteed victory, the person cultivating unstoppability is like a river flowing from a mountain to the sea. Consider the philosophy of the river. The river has a clear and unwavering intention to reach the ocean. Its purpose is singular and non-negotiable. This is its vision, its plot, as we discussed in our second discipline. Now, on its long journey, the river inevitably encounters obstacles. It meets a great, unmoving boulder. What does the river do? It does not lament its fate. It does not retreat to the mountaintop to formulate a new, perfect plan. It does not waste its energy trying to smash the boulder with a single, furious blow. The river is not invincible. The boulder, in that moment, is stronger. Instead, the river demonstrates the genius of unstoppability. It simply, immediately begins to explore its options. It probes to the left, it probes to the right. It builds its pressure to flow over the top. It seeps into tiny cracks to wear the stone down from within. It is utterly adaptable in its method, but completely inflexible in its intention. It is not attached to a single path. It is only attached to its forward momentum. Over a day, the boulder wins. Over a year, the boulder holds its ground. But over a millennium, the river always wins. Not through brute force, but through relentless, adaptable, persistent pressure. The gentle, persistent river will wear down the mighty, stubborn rock and continue on its journey. That, my friends, is unstoppability. Unstoppability is not the absence of obstacles. It is the commitment to move forward regardless of them. It is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about being the most persistent. It is the quiet, internal resolve that says, I may be delayed, I may be diverted, I may be forced to learn a new way, but I will not be stopped. So, how do we cultivate this profound river-like quality within ourselves? It is not a magical trait. It is a mindset built upon three core components. The first component is a radical bias toward action. The strategist who seeks invincibility believes that clarity must precede action. They must have the whole map before they take the first step. The unstoppable person understands a deeper truth. Clarity follows action. It does not precede it. You cannot think your way out of uncertainty. You must act your way out. When you are faced with a boulder of a problem, the first and most important response is to take one small, immediate step. Make the call. Send the email. Write the first paragraph. Do the first set of push-ups. This is the concept of the minimum viable action. It is the smallest possible act that moves you from a state of passive analysis to a state of active engagement. Why is this so powerful? Because action is an information gathering tool. When you act, the world gives you feedback. You learn what works and what doesn't. You discover unforeseen challenges and unexpected allies. Motion creates clarity. The strategist sits in the dark, afraid to move. The unstoppable person takes a small step with a flashlight, and in doing so, illuminates the next few feet of the path. That is all the clarity they need to take the next step. The second component is an emotional detachment from immediate outcomes. This is a subtle but critical mindset shift. The unstoppable person is deeply, passionately committed to their long-term vision to reaching the sea. But they are emotionally detached from the success or failure of any single attempt to get around the boulder. Think of a scientist conducting an experiment. The scientist is committed to discovering a cure for a disease. That is their vision. They formulate a hypothesis and run an experiment. If the experiment fails, does the scientist collapse in a heap, declaring themselves a failure? Of course not. A failed experiment is not a personal indictment. It is simply data. The scientist is thrilled. They have learned one more way that doesn't work, which brings them one step closer to the way that does. They are not attached to their hypothesis. They are attached to the truth. The unstoppable person views their actions in the same way. Every action is an experiment. If it works, you double down. If it fails, you celebrate the lesson, adjust your approach, and run the next experiment. This detachment neutralizes the paralyzing fear of failure. When you are no longer terrified of an outcome being labeled a failure, you are free to take massive, consistent action. The third and final component is a relentless commitment to the next step. The world can be an overwhelming place. The size of your goals can be intimidating. The complexity of your problems can seem insurmountable. The person who gets stopped is the person who stares at the entire mountain and freezes. The unstoppable person does not concern themselves with the whole mountain. Their entire focus is on one thing, and one thing only. What is the next right action I can take? You get knocked down. The project you spent 6 months on fails. The deal falls through. Your heart is broken. In these moments, it is easy to become lost in the vastness of the problem. The unstoppable mind cuts through that fog with a single, clarifying question: what is the next step? Maybe the next step is simply to stand up. Maybe it is to drink a glass of water. Maybe it is to make a single phone call to a mentor. This philosophy prevents overwhelm. It keeps you grounded in the present moment, in the realm of what you can actually control. You cannot solve the whole problem at once, but you can always take the next step. And the journey of 1,000 miles, as we know, is nothing more than a series of single next steps taken one after the other. This is the engine of unstoppability, a bias toward immediate action, an emotional detachment from outcomes, and a relentless commitment to the next step. When you internalize this philosophy, you forge a new identity. You cease to be a person who hopes for good luck. You cease to be a person who is afraid of challenges. You become a problem solver. You become a person who, like the river, may be diverted but is never defeated. You develop a quiet, powerful confidence that is not based on a perfect track record of success, but on a deep-seated belief in your own resilience. You know that no matter what life throws at you, you will have the capacity to figure it out. As we conclude this discipline, I want you to look at an obstacle in your life right now. A challenge you have been analyzing, worrying about, and waiting to address. I want you to stop seeing it as a wall and start seeing it as a boulder in your river. Forget about the myth of invincibility. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need a guarantee of success. All you need to do is embrace the philosophy of the river. Identify the one single next step you can take, a small, simple action. Detach your ego from the outcome of that action. See it as an experiment. And then take that step. And when you have taken it, you will ask the same question again: what is the next step? This is the rhythm of unstoppability. This is the cadence of progress. This is the mindset that allows the explorer to not just survive the journey on the frontier, but to thrive on it, to relentlessly move forward, and to ultimately reach the vast open sea of their potential. We have traveled a significant distance on our journey. We began by laying the unshakable foundation of self-belief. We then took up the author's pen, claiming ownership of our life's narrative. We embraced the courageous path of the explorer, learning to intelligently challenge our limits. And most recently, we cultivated the mindset of the unstoppable river, committed to relentless forward motion regardless of the obstacles in our path. This leads us to a vital and practical question. The river is unstoppable, yes, but what powers its flow? What is the unseen gravitational force that pulls it ever forward, ever towards the sea, even when the terrain is flat and the current is slow? An engine, no matter how powerful, is useless without fuel. A vehicle, no matter how resilient, is stationary without a driver. What, then, is the fuel for a life of unstoppable progress? Where does the drive to persist, to explore, and to grow truly come from? The source is not external. It is not found in motivation from others, nor in the promise of applause. The true engine of achievement is an internal one. It is a private, non-negotiable commitment you make with yourself. This brings us to the very heart of the engine room, to the fifth and most demanding of all the disciplines, the discipline of demands. There is a fundamental choice that confronts every human being at the dawn of each new day. It is a choice between two distinct and unavoidable pains. You must choose one. The first is the pain of discipline, The second is the pain of regret. The great secret that the successful have understood is this: the pain of discipline weighs ounces, while the pain of regret weighs tons. The pain of discipline is temporary. It is the discomfort of the workout, the focus required for deep work, the courage needed for a difficult conversation. It is an investment that pays a future dividend. The pain of regret, on the other hand, is permanent. It is the heavy, haunting weight of the life unlived, the potential unrealized, the words left unspoken. It is a debt that compounds with interest for the rest of your days. The discipline of demands is the conscious, daily choice to embrace the ounces of discipline so that you may avoid the tons of regret. It is the practice of holding yourself to a standard of effort and excellence that is higher than anyone else would expect of you. But before we can understand this discipline, we must first diagnose its opposite. We must understand the pervasive, seductive culture of good enough, for it is the default setting of the modern world. Most people live their lives not as creators, but as negotiators. They are in a constant, silent negotiation with mediocrity. The central guiding question of their life, whether they admit it or not, is this: what is the minimum I can do? What is the minimum I can do at my job to not get fired? What is the minimum I can do for my health to avoid immediate sickness? What is the minimum I can do in my relationship to keep the peace? What is the minimum amount of effort required to pass the test, to complete the project, to get by? This philosophy of the minimum is the great abdication of human potential. It is a slow, quiet surrender. It does not lead to a dramatic, spectacular failure. It leads to something far more tragic, a life of beige, a life that is neither hot nor cold, a life of untapped capacity and muted colors. The cost of this negotiation is a slow leak of self-respect. Deep down, you know you are capable of more, and every time you consciously choose the minimum, you cast a vote against your own potential. You make a small withdrawal from that bank of self-trust we have spoken of. The discipline of demands is the radical act of abandoning this negotiation entirely. It is the act of firing the lazy negotiator in your mind and replacing him with a demanding but inspiring coach. It is the act of changing the central question of your life. You stop asking what is the minimum required, and you start asking a question that is terrifying, exhilarating, and life-altering in its power. What is my absolute best in this moment? This shift in the central question is the beginning of all personal transformation. It is a declaration of war against mediocrity. It is a statement to yourself and to the universe that you will no longer be a passive participant in your own life, but an active agent of excellence. Now we must be very clear about what this means. This is not a call for a life of joyless, unsustainable burnout. This is not the flawed philosophy of the grinder we discussed earlier. The discipline of demands is not necessarily about working more hours. It is about bringing more of yourself to the hours that you work. It is about the quality of your presence, the intensity of your focus, and the integrity of your effort. A person who works for 8 hours but gives their absolute focused best during that time is practicing the discipline of demands far more than the person who is at work for 14 hours but spends most of it distracted, unfocused, and operating at 50% of their capacity. The goal is not to maximize time spent, but to maximize the excellence delivered within the time spent. If your job is to sweep the floor, the discipline of demands means you don't just sweep. You resolve to sweep that floor so perfectly, to get into every corner with such precision and care, that your work becomes a work of art, not for your boss, not for recognition, but for yourself, because that is your standard. This reveals the second crucial aspect of this discipline. The demand must be internal, not external. You are not demanding more from yourself to impress others, to win an award, or to get a promotion, though those things may happen as a byproduct. You are doing it to satisfy your own private, non-negotiable standard of excellence. When your drive is internal, it becomes immune to the opinions of others. You don't need praise to keep going, and you are not stopped by criticism because you are not performing for an audience. You are engaged in the private art of fulfilling your own potential. So how does one cultivate this internal engine? How do you go from being the negotiator to being the coach? It is a practice built upon 4 pillars. The first pillar is to clearly define your standard of excellence. The phrase, "my best," can feel vague. You must make it concrete. In the key areas of your life, your work, your health, your relationships, what does your absolute best actually look like in behavioral terms? For example, at work, your standard might be, "my reports are not just submitted on time, they are clear, concise, and error-free." My contribution in meetings is not just to speak, it is to come prepared with a thoughtful solution. For your health, it might be, "I honor my commitment to move my body for 30 minutes every day, no matter my mood." By defining the standard, you make it real. You create a benchmark against which you can measure yourself. The second pillar is to win the first hour of your day. The first 60 minutes after you wake up sets the tone for everything that follows. The negotiator grabs their phone, floods their mind with the reactive chaos of the world, and starts the day on their back foot. The practitioner of this discipline understands that the first hour is sacred. They demand excellence from themselves in this period. They wake up on time, they hydrate, they move their body, they spend time in quiet reflection or read something that nourishes their mind. They win this first battle, and in doing so, they create a powerful momentum of discipline that they carry with them throughout the rest of the day. The third pillar is the practical application of the +1 philosophy. This is a simple, powerful technique to train the muscle of demanding more. Whatever the expectation is, whether it's from your boss or from yourself, you add a little bit more. If the task is to make 10 sales calls, you make 11. If your goal is to run 3 miles, you run 3.1. If you promise to deliver the report by Wednesday, you deliver it on Tuesday with 1 extra insightful chart. This practice of +1 is a small daily act of defiance against the pull of the minimum. It consistently recalibrates your sense of what you are capable of and re-engineers your identity into that of a person who always goes the extra mile. The fourth and final pillar is the accountability mirror. This is the practice of a brief, brutally honest end-of-day review. Before you sleep, you look yourself in the mirror and you ask the question, did I live up to my own standard today? Did I ask for my best? This is not an exercise in self-flagellation. It is an exercise in honest accounting. Some days, the answer will be a resounding yes. You celebrate that. Other days, the answer will be no. You do not judge yourself. You simply acknowledge the truth, you learn the lesson, and you resolve to meet the standard tomorrow. This private, daily accountability is what keeps the engine tuned and running. When you commit to this discipline, when you define your standard, win the first hour, practice +1, and hold yourself accountable, you initiate a series of profound transformations. The first is an incredible acceleration in your skills. When you are consistently demanding your best and operating at the edge of your abilities, your rate of learning and improvement is exponential compared to the person who is coasting in the center of their comfort zone. The second, and most important, is the massive expansion of your self-respect. Every time you demand your best from yourself and you deliver, you make a monumental deposit into that bank account of self-worth. You are providing yourself with irrefutable evidence that you are a person of high standards, a person of discipline, a person of excellence. You begin to see yourself differently, and this new identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And third, you trigger a gravitational shift in your life. Excellence is a magnet. When you operate at a high standard, you naturally begin to attract people and opportunities that resonate at that same frequency. You will find that you have less patience for mediocrity, for excuses, for negativity, both in yourself and in others. You will begin to repel that which is average and attract that which is exceptional. This is the discipline of demands. It is the choice to live a life of intention, not of negotiation. It is the commitment to being the driver, not the passenger. It is the understanding that the greatest demand you will ever face is not from a boss, a client, or a competitor, but from the quiet, knowing voice within you that knows what you are truly capable of. This is the engine, this is the fuel, it is the force that powers the unstoppable river on its journey to the sea. It is the commitment that transforms a life of quiet desperation into a life of loud achievement. It is the decision to pay the price of discipline today, so you do not have to pay the price of regret for all of your tomorrows. We are now at the halfway point. We've talked about the foundation of belief, of authorship, of stretching our limits, of being unstoppable, and of setting high standards. If these ideas are resonating with you, if you feel a stirring inside that says, this is the language I need to hear, then I invite you to join this community of learners. Take a brief moment to subscribe to this channel. It is a simple click, but it is also a declaration. It's a signal to yourself that you are serious about this journey of personal development. We have 5 more essential disciplines to cover, and by subscribing, you ensure you won't miss the insights and strategies we share here every week. All right, let us continue the work. We have now arrived at the very nexus where the internal world of our standards meets the external world of our actions. We have journeyed through the foundational disciplines of belief, authorship, exploration, and persistence. Most recently, we have established the critical importance of the discipline of demands, the internal engine that drives us to choose the ounces of discipline over the tons of regret, to consistently ask for our best, not the minimum required. This internal commitment to a higher standard is the source of our power, but power that remains purely internal is like a brilliant musical score that is never performed. It is potential, unrealized. For this internal standard to shape our external reality, it must be expressed, it must be embodied, it must be performed day in and day out on the great stage of life. And this brings us to a discipline that is both profoundly philosophical and intensely practical. It is the bridge between who you are now and who you are determined to become. This is the 6th discipline. Inhabit the role you aspire to. There exists in the world of theater a powerful and transformative practice known as method acting. A novice actor learns to say the lines and mimic the emotions of a character. The result is often a hollow imitation. But the method actor goes deeper. They do not simply pretend to be the character, they seek to become the character from the inside out. They study the character's history, adopt their worldview, change their posture, alter their habits. They strive to think the character's thoughts and feel the character's feelings. The result is a performance of such authenticity and power that the line between actor and character begins to dissolve. I am here today to propose that you become a method actor for the single greatest role you will ever be cast in, the role of your future self. You cannot wait until you have the title to start acting like a leader. You cannot wait until you have the wealth to start behaving with the discipline of a successful person. You cannot wait until you feel confident to start acting with courage. To do so is to misunderstand the very law of creation. The external world is not the cause of your internal state, it is a reflection of it. You must first generate the cause within yourself. You must live, breathe, and act as if you already are the person you are striving to become. This is not a call for deception. This is not about faking it till you make it in the superficial sense of pretending to have credentials you do not possess. It is a call for a far deeper, more profound alignment. It is the discipline of closing the gap between your aspiration and your action. It is the understanding that you do not achieve your way to a new identity. You act your way into it. To understand why this is not merely a psychological trick but a fundamental principle of human transformation, we must look at the science of the self. Your identity, your sense of who you are, is not a fixed, immutable object. It is a living, fluid construct, a story that your brain tells itself, reinforced every day by the evidence of your own actions. When you consistently act in a certain way, your brain, in its relentless pursuit of coherence, begins to update its story about who you are. When you consistently choose the difficult, disciplined action, your brain reasons, only a disciplined person would do that. Therefore, I must be a disciplined person. When you consistently speak up in meetings with thoughtful ideas, your brain concludes, only a leader would behave this way. Therefore, I am a leader. You are not fooling your brain. You are providing it with new, compelling evidence. You are consciously directing its process of identity creation. This is the very essence of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experience and behavior. Your actions are the sculptor's chisel, carving new neural pathways that solidify into the character you choose to play. So, How do we engage in this form of method acting for our own lives? The process can be broken down into 3 dimensions of inhabitation. You must rehearse your role in your mind, in your body, and in your daily actions. The first dimension is to inhabit the mindset. Before you can act the part, you must learn to think the part. This is the internal rehearsal. You must spend deliberate time contemplating the person you wish to become. Ask yourself, how would this ideal version of myself think? What beliefs would they hold about the world, about challenges, about themselves? The person you are now might see a problem and think, this is a threat, this is overwhelming. The successful entrepreneur you aspire to be sees the same problem and thinks, this is an opportunity. This is an interesting puzzle to be solved. You must consciously and deliberately practice adopting this new perspective. Before making a decision, pause and ask, how would the person I am committed to becoming evaluate this situation? This requires you to become the curator of your own thoughts. You begin to notice your old limiting thought patterns, the voice of the character, and you consciously replace them with the thought patterns of the author. You are not suppressing your old thoughts. You are simply choosing not to give them the lead role. You are recasting your own internal dialogue. This internal rehearsal is the equivalent of the actor studying their script, understanding not just the words, but the motivation behind them. The second dimension is to inhabit the physiology. Your body is not merely a vehicle that carries your brain around. Your physical state is in a constant feedback loop with your emotional and psychological state. You cannot inhabit the role of a confident, powerful person if you are physically carrying yourself like a victim. Consider the physiology of a defeated person. Their shoulders are slumped, their gaze is directed downwards, their breathing is shallow, their movements are hesitant. This posture both reflects and reinforces their internal state of helplessness. Now, consider the physiology of a confident leader. Their shoulders are back, their chest is open, their gaze is level and direct, their handshake is firm, their movements are deliberate. This posture doesn't just signal confidence to others, it signals confidence back to their own nervous system. The discipline of inhabiting your role requires you to consciously manage your physiology. Before you walk into an important meeting, take 2 minutes to stand tall, to breathe deeply, to put a confident smile on your face. The act of physically embodying the state you wish to feel will begin to actually generate that state within you. Dress the part, not necessarily in expensive clothes, but in a way that shows respect for yourself and for the role you are playing. Your physiology is the costume for your character. Wear it with intention. The third and most critical dimension is to inhabit the actions. A mindset and a posture that do not translate into behavior are nothing more than a dress rehearsal with no opening night. The world does not reward you for your thoughts or your posture. It rewards you for your actions. This is where the discipline of demands from our previous chapter becomes the script for your daily performance. You must identify the daily habits, the consistent behaviors, and the key decisions of the person you aspire to be. And you must begin executing them now with the resources you have. If you want to be a financially disciplined person, you don't wait for a windfall. You start by tracking every single dollar you spend today. That is the action of a disciplined person. If you want to be a respected expert in your field, you don't wait for a diploma or a title. You start by dedicating 1 hour every single day to focused study. That is the action of an expert. If you want to be a person of great health and vitality, you don't wait for a health scare. You choose the salad over the fries for lunch today. You take the stairs instead of the elevator. That is the action of a healthy person. Your identity is not defined by some grand future accomplishment. Your identity is the sum total of your daily actions. Each action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to be. Are your daily actions casting a vote for the person you are now, or are they casting a vote for the person you are committed to becoming? The choice is yours in every single moment. Now, we must address the great challenge that arises when one begins this discipline, the feeling of being an imposter. When you first start acting as if, a voice inside your head will scream at you. It will say, who do you think you are? You're a fraud. You're not a leader. You're just pretending. You're not a disciplined person. You're just putting on a show. This feeling is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing everything right. The feeling of being an imposter is the feeling of growth itself. It is the emotional friction that occurs when your old identity clashes with your new chosen behavior. You must learn to welcome this feeling. See it as a navigational beacon, confirming that you are stepping outside the familiar territory of your old self and into the new frontier of your potential. The key is to persist in the action despite the feeling. The feeling of authenticity does not precede the action, it follows it. You will feel like an imposter for a week, or a month, or even a year. But if you persist in the daily actions, if you keep inhabiting the mindset, the physiology, and the behaviors of your chosen role, a magical thing will happen. One day you will wake up and realize that it is no longer an act. It is no longer a performance. It has become who you are. The rehearsal has ended, and you have seamlessly merged with the character. The new identity feels natural because you have built it, action by action, vote by vote. As you persist in this discipline, the world around you will begin to change. The universe has a way of reflecting your own identity back at you. When you consistently show up as a leader, people will begin to treat you like one and entrust you with leadership opportunities. When you consistently act with the discipline of a successful person, opportunities for success will begin to appear where there were none before. The world does not respond to your secret desires. It responds to your demonstrated identity. You create the right circumstances through the way you show up every single day. This is the bridge between the internal and the external. The discipline of demands is the internal commitment to excellence. This discipline, inhabiting the role, is the external expression of that commitment. It is the conscious, deliberate practice of being the person you want to become long before the world gives you the title or the rewards. Your future is shaped by what you do today. The role you want to play in your life is available to you right now. All you have to do is step into it. Start thinking the part, start standing the part. And most importantly, start acting the part. It may not be easy. It will certainly be uncomfortable. But when you consistently live the role you want to become, you will close the gap between your reality and your dreams. You will realize that you were always capable of becoming exactly who you have dreamed of, and once you do, there will be no stopping you. We have now arrived at a pivotal moment in our architectural journey. We have explored the disciplines of the external world, the actions of authorship, the courage of the explorer, the persistence of the unstoppable river. Most recently, we have delved into the profound discipline of inhabitation, the practice of acting as if, of consciously performing the role of the person we are determined to become. But this discipline, as powerful as it is, leads to a critical question. For an actor's performance to be truly transcendent, it cannot be a hollow imitation. It must be fueled by a deep internal conviction. You cannot sustainably act like a leader on the outside if you are internally consumed by the thoughts of a follower. You cannot consistently perform the actions of a successful person if your mind is a breeding ground for the beliefs of a victim. The external performance must be supported by an internal reality. And to construct that internal reality, we must go to the very source code of our experience. We must enter the architect's office, the drafting room where the blueprints for our entire life are drawn. We must enter the mind. This brings us to what is perhaps the most powerful and consequential of all the disciplines, the one upon which all external realities are ultimately built. This is the seventh discipline, your mind as the architect of reality. The greatest discovery in the history of human thought is this simple yet earth-shattering premise. Your external world is largely a mirror, a physical reflection of your dominant internal world. If you do not like the reflection you see in your finances, in your health, in your relationships, the answer is not to try and paint the mirror. The answer is to change the person standing in front of it. The work is always and only an inside job. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are the creator of your experience, of your circumstances. Two people can face the exact same event, a business failure, a market downturn, a personal rejection. For one, it is the end of the story, a final verdict on their worthlessness. For the other, it is a valuable lesson, a necessary plot twist, a catalyst for growth. The event was the same. The only variable was the mind through which the event was interpreted. Your mind is the architect, and your thoughts are the living blueprints for the reality you inhabit. You are, at every moment, designing the structure of your life with the thoughts you choose to entertain. To grasp the immense power you hold, I want you to embrace a single, powerful metaphor for the rest of our time together today. Your mind is a garden. Think of your subconscious mind as a plot of the most fertile soil on earth. This soil is miraculous in its power, but it is also completely and utterly impartial. It holds no preferences, no biases, and no judgment. It has only one function: to grow whatever seed is planted in it. It will grow a beautiful, life-giving flower with the same impersonal efficiency that it will grow a deadly, poisonous weed. It simply grows what it is given. That fertile soil is your subconscious mind. Your thoughts are the seeds. Every single thought you have, from the most fleeting notion to the most deeply held conviction, is a seed that falls upon this fertile soil. And these seeds come in many forms. There are the wind-blown seeds, the random thoughts, opinions, and fears that drift into your awareness from the outside world, from the news, from a casual conversation. These are harmless if they are allowed to blow past. But if they find a place to land, if you give them your attention, they can begin to take root. Then there are the weeds. These are the thoughts of fear, of doubt, of worry, of cynicism, of resentment, of jealousy. Weeds are aggressive. They require no special care or cultivation to grow. In fact, if you do nothing, if you simply leave the garden of your mind untended, it is the weeds that will naturally and inevitably take over. They will grow strong and choke out all the light and nourishment from the more delicate plants. And finally, there are the flowers and the fruit-bearing trees. These are the thoughts of courage, of love, of abundance, of gratitude, of possibility. These are the thoughts that produce a beautiful and nourishing life. But unlike the weeds, these plants must be chosen consciously. They must be planted deliberately. They must be watered, nourished, and protected. They require the active, daily attention of a master gardener. You, my friends, are the master gardener of your own mind. And the quality of your life's harvest will be a direct reflection of the quality of your gardening. This is not a passive role. To leave your garden untended is to make a choice to surrender your magnificent plot of land to the random, wind-blown seeds of the world and the aggressive, encroaching weeds of your own fear. The work of the master gardener consists of three essential, ongoing duties. The first duty is to stand guard at the gate of your mind. This is the discipline of consumption. A wise gardener knows that they cannot cultivate a beautiful garden if they are simultaneously allowing truckloads of toxic waste to be dumped upon their soil. You must become a vigilant gatekeeper of the information and influences you allow into your inner world. We live in an age of information pollution. The unfiltered stream of the 24-hour news cycle, with its relentless focus on fear, crisis, and division, is a potent poison for the soil of your mind. The curated illusions of social media, designed to provoke comparison and feelings of inadequacy, are a fast-growing species of weed. The casual gossip and cynicism of negative people is a toxic fertilizer that helps only the weeds to grow stronger. To be a master gardener, you must make a conscious choice to turn away from this pollution. This does not mean being uninformed. It means being intentional. It means choosing to nourish your mind with powerful, life-affirming input. You must read good books, the distilled wisdom of the greatest minds in history. You must listen to educational and inspiring content that expands your thinking. You must engage in conversations that are about ideas and possibilities, not about people and problems. You must spend time in silence, allowing the soil of your mind to rest and recover. Guarding the gate is an active, not a passive, responsibility. You are the only one who can decide what you allow to enter your private mental sanctuary. Choose your inputs as carefully as you would choose the food you eat, for they are the very substance from which your reality will be built. The second duty of the master gardener is to uproot the weeds. It is not enough to simply stop allowing new toxins in. You must also deal with the weeds that have already taken root from years of untended thinking. Now here is a critical insight. You cannot fight a thought directly, To resist a thought is to give it more energy. If I tell you, do not think of a pink elephant, what is the first thing that appears in your mind? The very act of resistance strengthens the object of resistance. So, the wise gardener does not spend their day wrestling with the weeds. They do not get down on their hands and knees and scream at the weeds to go away. The method is more elegant and far more effective. The method is not resistance, but replacement. The process is simple. First, you must practice awareness. You must learn to notice a negative thought as soon as it arises without judgment. Observe it as if you were a scientist. Ah, there is the weed of self-doubt again. Interesting, the weed of worry about the future has just sprouted. By observing the thought instead of becoming the thought, you create a space of separation. Second, you acknowledge the thought without feeding it. You don't have to fight it. You can simply say, I see you, and then you let it be. Third, and this is the most crucial step, you consciously and deliberately plant a different, more powerful seed in its place. When the weed of I can't do this appears, you don't argue with it. You simply, calmly plant the flower of I am capable of learning how to do this. When the weed of what if I fail sprouts, you plant the mighty tree of what if I succeed. And even if I don't, what is the valuable lesson I will learn? Over time, as you consistently withdraw your attention from the weeds and place it upon the flowers, the weeds begin to wither from lack of nourishment. You are not fighting the darkness, you are simply turning on the light. The light of your focused, conscious attention is the most powerful tool you have. Use it wisely. The third duty of the master gardener is to deliberately cultivate the flowers. This is the proactive, creative aspect of your work. It is not enough to simply defend your garden against weeds. You must be an active agent in planting and nurturing the thoughts, beliefs, and feelings that you want to see manifest in your life. One of the most powerful ways to do this is through the practice of focused visualization. Visualization is the act of creating a clear, detailed, and emotionally charged picture in your mind of the reality you wish to create. This is like holding up a photograph of a magnificent rose to the soil and saying, this is what we are growing here. When you consistently hold that image in your mind, you are providing your subconscious with a clear blueprint. You are planting a powerful seed and watering it with the emotion of its fulfillment. Another tool is the practice of gratitude. Gratitude is the miracle grow of the mental garden. It is a transformative force. When you are in a state of genuine gratitude, it is impossible for the weeds of fear, anger, or lack to coexist. Gratitude shifts the entire climate of your mind from one of scarcity to one of abundance. The practice of starting or ending your day by deliberately focusing on what you are grateful for is one of the most powerful ways to ensure your garden remains fertile ground for only the most beautiful and life-giving plants. This is the work. You guard the gate. You uproot the weeds through replacement. And you deliberately cultivate the flowers through visualization and gratitude. As you engage in this daily discipline of mental gardening, the causal chain of creation begins to unfold. Your dominant thoughts, when charged with emotion, crystallize into beliefs. Your beliefs are the command center for your actions. You will always act in a way that is consistent with what you believe to be true about yourself and the world. Your consistent actions over time harden into habits. Your collection of habits forms the substance of your character. And your character inevitably creates your destiny, your tangible, external reality. It all begins with a single seed, a single thought. Your brain has a remarkable filtering mechanism. It is impossible for you to consciously process the billions of bits of information that bombard your senses every second. So, your brain learns to filter for what is important to you. When you decide to buy a particular model of car, you suddenly start seeing that car everywhere on the road. The cars were always there, but your brain, now having been given a clear instruction, has started to filter for it. The same is true for your life. When you decide through your focused thought that your reality is one of opportunity, your brain will begin to filter your environment and show you the opportunities that were always there. If you decide that your reality is one of scarcity and reasons to be afraid, your brain will diligently find all the evidence to support that belief as well. Your beliefs do not just reflect your reality, they actively select it. Therefore, as we conclude this discipline, the responsibility rests squarely upon your shoulders. You are the architect. You are the master gardener. The soil of your mind is your greatest asset. What you have harvested in your life up to this point is the result of your past gardening. If you do not like the harvest, you must change the seeds you are planting today. Do not allow your garden to be an abandoned lot overrun by the random weeds of the world. Make the conscious decision right now to become a deliberate, intentional, and masterful cultivator of your own mind. For it is from this secret inner garden that all the fruits of your external life will grow. We have now journeyed deep into the inner world, to the very source code of our reality. We have accepted the profound responsibility of being the master gardener of our own mind. We have come to understand that our thoughts are the seeds, our mind is the fertile soil, and our external world is merely the harvest that results from our inner cultivation. We have the tools to guard the gate, to uproot the weeds, and to deliberately cultivate the flowers of a magnificent life. This understanding, as powerful as it is, leads us to a final and crucial question for the architect of the mind. A gardener, even a master gardener, cannot create a masterpiece without a design. A random collection of beautiful flowers is pleasant, but it is not a landscape. An architect cannot build a coherent and powerful structure without a blueprint. The mind, in all its creative power, requires direction. It needs a guiding principle. What, then, is the blueprint that we hand to the architect of our mind? What is the design that guides the work of the gardener? This brings us to the discipline that provides that very blueprint. It is the framework that gives structure to your thoughts, your actions, and your entire reality. This is the eighth discipline, the non-negotiable power of your standards. There is a fundamental law of life that, once understood, clarifies everything. It is this: you do not get in life what you wish for, what you hope for, or what you want. You get in life what you are willing to tolerate. You get what you settle for. Your life right now, in this very moment, your income, your health, your relationships, your environment is a direct and unflinching reflection of the standards you have set for yourself. To understand this power, I want you to consider a simple yet profound analogy. In every moment of your life, you are behaving as one of two simple devices. You are either a thermometer or you are a thermostat. The vast majority of people live their lives as human thermometers. A thermometer is a reactive instrument. It has no will of its own. Its sole function is to measure and reflect the temperature of the room it is in. If the room is cold, the thermometer reads cold. If the economy is bad, the thermometer feels poor. If the people around them are negative, the thermometer feels pessimistic. If circumstances are difficult, the thermometer reflects a life of struggle. The thermometer is a victim of its environment. It is a life of effect, not of cause. But there is another way to live. You can choose to be the thermostat. A thermostat is a proactive instrument. It is a leader. A thermostat does not merely reflect the temperature of the room, it sets the temperature of the room. It has a standard, a non-negotiable internal setting. Let's say that setting is 72 degrees. If the room becomes too cold, the thermostat doesn't complain. It doesn't blame the weather. It takes action. It turns on the heat. If the room becomes too hot, it doesn't make excuses. It activates the air conditioning. The thermostat's job is to make the environment conform to its internal standard, not the other way around. It is a life of cause, not of effect. Your standards are your personal psychological thermostat. They are the internal setting that determines the quality of your life. And the universe, like a dutiful heating and cooling system, will work tirelessly to deliver to you the conditions that match your setting. So, what is a standard? It is not the same as a goal or a dream. A goal is a target you aim for in the future. A standard is the floor you refuse to step below right now, today. A dream is a beautiful picture of a distant island. A standard is the seaworthiness of the ship you are building to get there. A standard is the minimum level of quality, of behavior, of conduct, and of experience that you are willing to accept from yourself and for yourself. Your standards are the most powerful declaration of your own self-worth. When you have a low standard for how people are allowed to treat you, you are making a subconscious declaration to the world. I do not believe I am worthy of respect. When you have a low standard for your own health and energy, you are making a declaration, my vitality is not a priority. Your standards are the rules you have written for your own game. If you do not set the rules, the world will set them for you, and they will rarely be in your favor. To truly grasp this, we must examine the three foundational arenas where your standards operate. The first, and by far the most important, is the standard you set for yourself. This is the foundation upon which all other standards are built. This is about your personal code of conduct. It is about your work ethic, your integrity, your commitment to your word. It is the direct, practical application of the discipline of demands we explored earlier. It is about what you do when no one is watching. That is the true, unvarnished measure of your personal standards. Does your standard allow you to cut corners? Does it allow you to give less than your best effort? Does it allow you to break the small promises you make to yourself? Or is your standard non-negotiable? Does it demand excellence for its own sake? Does it require you to show up with integrity even when it is difficult? The person who holds themselves to a high internal standard needs no external supervision. They are their own toughest boss and their own most inspiring leader. The second arena is the standard you set for what you will accept from others. This standard governs the quality of every relationship in your life, both personal and professional. You teach people how to treat you by what you demonstrate you are willing to tolerate. If your standard allows for disrespect, for broken promises, for emotional manipulation, for negativity, then you are sending out a clear signal to the universe that you are available for those experiences. You will attract people who are comfortable meeting that low standard. Setting a high standard in this arena is not about being arrogant, difficult, or demanding of others. It is about having a profound level of self-respect. It is the quiet, firm act of setting boundaries. It is saying, with your actions, I will not participate in this dynamic. It is refusing to engage in gossip. It is walking away from a conversation that is toxic. It is lovingly but firmly communicating that your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being are valuable, and you will not allow them to be violated. When you raise your standard for what you will accept from others, something remarkable happens. Some people may leave your life because they are no longer comfortable with the new, higher temperature. But they will be replaced by people who are drawn to that warmth, people who operate at that same high standard of respect and integrity. The third arena, which completes the circle, is the standard you set for how you treat others. A person of high standards is not a tyrant who expects the world to cater to them. They are a leader who embodies the very behavior they expect. They hold others to a high standard because they first hold themselves to one. And they treat every person with a level of respect, integrity, and professionalism that reflects their own internal code. They are impeccable with their word. They show up on time. They listen fully. They do not engage in the low standard behavior they refuse to tolerate from others. This is the standard of your own character in action. It is the thermostat, not just heating its own house, but contributing to the warmth of the entire neighborhood. So, if our lives are a reflection of our standards, the most important work we can ever do is the work of raising them. But how is this done? It is a conscious, four-step process. Step one is the brutally honest audit. You cannot change a standard you are not aware of. This requires you to take out a piece of paper and conduct a fearless inventory of your life. Ask yourself, what am I currently tolerating? In my health, what am I tolerating? Low energy, poor diet, lack of exercise. In my finances, what am I tolerating? Debt, disorganization, living paycheck to paycheck. In my relationships, what am I tolerating? Disrespect, lack of support, one-sided effort. In my personal environment, what am I tolerating? Clutter, disorganization. You must write it all down without judgment. This is your current thermostat setting. Step two is the conscious declaration of a new standard. Based on your audit, you now make a clear, written decision. You cross out what you will no longer tolerate, and you write next to it your new non-negotiable minimum standard. For example, I will no longer tolerate feeling tired all the time. My new minimum standard is to get 7 hours of quality sleep per night, or I will no longer tolerate being in debt. My new minimum standard is to save 10% of my income before I pay anyone else. This is not a goal. It is a new law for your life. It is the new temperature you are setting for your thermostat. Step 3 is to understand and embrace the upfront cost of elevation. Raising your standards is not free. There is a price of admission to a higher quality of life, and that price is paid in temporary discomfort. It will be uncomfortable to say no to the foods that give you low energy. It will be uncomfortable to have a boundary-setting conversation with a friend or family member. It may be lonely for a time as you transition away from people who resonated with your old, lower standard. You must see this discomfort not as a punishment, but as the price of entry. It is the friction that proves you are moving up. Step 4 is the curation of your environment. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your environment is a powerful external thermostat that is constantly influencing your own. To sustain a higher standard, you must consciously place yourself in environments and around people that reflect that standard. Seek out the thermostats. Find people who are already operating at the level you aspire to. Their high standards will become your new normal. Minimize contact with the thermometers, the people who only reflect back the negativity and limitations of the world. You cannot live a 72-degree life if you are constantly surrounding yourself with 30-degree people. This is the discipline. It is the act of consciously deciding the quality of life you are available for, and then ruthlessly eliminating everything that does not meet that standard. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. It is the blueprint you hand to the architect of your mind. When your standard is clear, your mind knows what kind of thoughts to cultivate. It knows what kind of reality to build. Your life as it is today is the result of your past standards. The life you desire will be the result of the standards you set and enforce starting now. So I ask you, what is your setting? Are you a thermometer reflecting a world of circumstance, or are you the thermostat creating a world of your own design? Set your standard in the stars and refuse to live anywhere else. We have now climbed to a significant vantage point on our architectural journey. We have laid our foundation in belief, taken up the author's pen, embraced the explorer's path, cultivated the unstoppable mindset, fueled it with the discipline of demands, begun to inhabit our chosen role, and accepted the profound responsibility of being the master gardener of our mind. Most recently, we have committed to the life of the thermostat, the conscious and deliberate act of setting a high, non-negotiable standard for our lives. But the very moment you make this commitment, the moment you raise your standard and declare your intention to change your reality, you will awaken a powerful, ancient, and formidable force. The moment you decide to step off the well-trodden path and onto the frontier of your potential, you will come face to face with the guardian that stands at the gate of every comfort zone. This guardian is the oldest and most pervasive emotion in human history. It is the silent killer of dreams, the saboteur of ambition, the great paralytic agent of the human spirit. Its name is fear. To live by the high standards you have set, to continue on the path of the author and the explorer, you must become a master of this internal resistance. You must learn to see this guardian not as an enemy to be fought, but as an illusion to be understood and dissolved. This brings us to the discipline that enables all courageous action. It is the key that unlocks the cage of mediocrity. This is the 9th discipline, dissolving the illusion of fear. Let us begin by reframing our entire relationship with this powerful emotion. Fear is not a weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is a biological and psychological response that is deeply wired into our very being. It is the ancient, primal alarm system designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to keep you safe, to keep you alive. Think of fear as a well-meaning but deeply outdated security guard. This guard was hired millions of years ago for a world filled with saber-toothed tigers and immediate physical threats. Its job was to trigger a powerful fight-or-flight response to keep you from being eaten. And at that job, it was brilliant. The problem is, this ancient security guard has never been retrained for the modern world. Its software has never been updated. And so, today, it cannot distinguish between the threat of a predator and the threat of picking up the phone to make a sales call. It cannot tell the difference between the danger of being cast out of the tribe to starve and the danger of speaking up in a meeting. It treats a potential business failure with the same life or death urgency as a physical attack. Our work is not to fire this well-meaning but incompetent guard. Our work is to become the wise manager who can listen to the guard's panicked report, thank it for its concern, and then calmly and consciously make a decision based on logic and vision, not on ancient, outdated programming. To do this, we must first understand the anatomy of the illusion. What is fear, really? Fear, in the context of our ambitions and our growth, is almost never about a present moment reality. Fear is a misuse of the creative faculty of your imagination. Your imagination is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It is the architect's office where all creation begins. You can use this incredible tool to build a vivid, compelling vision of the future. You want a future of success, of contribution, of joy. This is the work of the author, or you can use that very same tool to build a vivid, detailed, and emotionally charged vision of a future you do not want. You can imagine failure, you can imagine rejection, you can imagine embarrassment, you can imagine loss. This is the act of worrying. Worrying is a prayer for what you don't want. It is the act of building a detailed blueprint of failure and then being surprised when the universe begins to construct it. Fear is a story you tell yourself about a future that has not yet happened. It is a phantom. It is a ghost that you, yourself, have conjured in the theater of your own mind. And because you are the creator of this ghost, you also have the power to turn on the lights and see that the stage is, and always has been, empty. All of our hundreds of specific fears, the fear of spiders, of flying, of public speaking, of failure, of success, of intimacy, of being alone, are ultimately branches of just a few core roots. If we can understand these roots, we can stop trimming the branches and begin to heal the entire tree. The first root is the fear of not being enough. This is the great fear of the imposter. It is the belief that, deep down, you are fundamentally flawed, lacking, and unworthy of the success you seek. It is the fear that if you try and fail, you will not just have failed at a task, you will have been exposed as a failure as a person. This fear keeps us from even starting the journey. The second root is the fear of loss. This is the fear of losing what we currently have. It is the fear of losing financial security if we start a new business. The fear of losing the approval of our friends or family if we choose an unconventional path. The fear of losing our current comfort if we step into the unknown. This fear keeps us clinging to a safe but unfulfilling present. The third root is the fear of the process. This is the fear of the struggle itself. It is the fear of the hard work, the long hours, the inevitable pain, the discomfort, and the sacrifice required to achieve anything worthwhile. We want the prize, but we are afraid of the price. This fear leads to procrastination and a search for non-existent shortcuts. Every fear you feel is a variation of one of these three themes. And the first step to dissolving them is to recognize them for what they are. Stories rooted in a feeling of not enough, a fear of loss, or a fear of the process. So, how do we, as the wise manager of our own mind, walk past the screaming security guard? How do we turn on the lights in the theater? The process is not one of brute force or of powering through. It is a process of intelligence, of strategy, and of grace. It involves three primary tools of dissolution. The first tool is the light of definition. Fear thrives in the shadows. It loves vagueness. A vague, undefined anxiety is a terrifying, monstrous specter. A clearly defined fear is simply a problem to be solved. This tool requires you to take your greatest fear and drag it, kicking and screaming, into the bright, sharp light of specificity. Take a piece of paper and write down the action you are afraid to take. Now, ask yourself three questions. Question one, what is the absolute worst case scenario if I do this? Define it in excruciating detail. What would actually happen? You get fired, the business fails, you lose all your money, you are embarrassed. Write it all down. Question two, for each of those worst case points, what could I do to prevent it, or at least minimize the damage? This shifts your mind from a state of panic to a state of strategic problem solving. Question 3, and this is the most important. If the absolute worst case scenario were to happen, what specific steps could I take to get back to where I am right now? You would find another job. You would move in with family for a while. You would start over. When you write this down, you will almost always discover that the worst case scenario, while unpleasant, is survivable. You will realize that the monster you imagined in the dark is, in the light of day, a manageable challenge. This process takes the fangs out of the fear. It transforms a terrifying phantom into a simple list of problems for which you can devise solutions. The second tool is the solvent of action. Fear and focused, present moment action cannot occupy the same psychological space at the same time. You cannot be intensely focused on taking the next step and simultaneously be lost in a fearful story about the future. Action is the universal solvent that dissolves the residue of fear. The mistake most people make is waiting for the feeling of fear to go away before they take action. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. The feeling of fear does not vanish before the act. It vanishes during the act. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the judgment that something else is more important than fear. The key is to shrink the action to a size that is so small, so non-intimidating, that it is impossible not to take it. This is the courage of the first step. You are not trying to conquer the entire mountain of your fear at once. Your only task is to take one single step. If you fear making sales calls, your task is not to become a master salesman. Your task is to pick up the phone and dial one number. If you fear writing a book, your task is not to write a masterpiece. Your task is to write one sentence. That first small act of courage is a powerful declaration. It sends a message to your ancient security guard that while its alarm is noted, a different part of you is now in charge. And that first step makes the second step just a little bit easier. The third tool is the anchor of purpose. Fear is almost always a self-centered emotion. It revolves around the question, what will happen to me? What if I fail? What if I get rejected? What if I look foolish? The most powerful antidote to a self-centered fear is another centered or mission-centered purpose. When your why is big enough, the fears about me become small and insignificant in comparison. When your mission is to serve your clients with excellence, your fear of making a phone call diminishes. When your purpose is to provide a better life for your family, your fear of taking a calculated business risk is put into its proper perspective. When your commitment is to your art, your fear of criticism becomes less important than your need to create. Your purpose, the plot of your story we defined in the second discipline, is the great anchor that holds you steady in the storm of fear. When you feel the winds of anxiety begin to blow, you do not focus on the storm. You focus on the anchor. You remind yourself why you are on this journey in the first place. A purpose that is bigger than your fear will always, always pull you through it. When you master these three tools, the light of definition, the solvent of action, and the anchor of purpose, your entire relationship with fear will be transformed. You will no longer see it as a stop sign. Instead, you will learn to see it as a compass. The feeling of fear is a physiological and psychological signal that you are standing at the edge of your comfort zone, and the edge of your comfort zone is the only place where growth can occur. Therefore, the presence of fear is a powerful and reliable indicator that you are moving in the right direction. It is a sign that you are on the path of the explorer. It is a signal that you are attempting something worthwhile. When you learn to reframe it this way, you can actually learn to get excited when you feel fear, that feeling of a pounding heart, of sweaty palms, instead of interpreting it as danger, retreat. You can learn to interpret it as, this feeling. This is the feeling of leveling up. This is the feeling of my own evolution. I am on the right track. This is the ultimate mastery, not the elimination of fear, but the transformation of fear from an enemy that stops you into a guide that directs you. The guardian at the gate never truly goes away, but you learn that its roar is far worse than its bite. You learn that it is made of smoke and shadows, an illusion that dissolves when you walk towards it with clarity, with purpose, and with a commitment to taking that first small, courageous step. Your dreams, your ambitions, the life that is waiting for you and the contract of your potential, it all lies on the other side of that guardian. It lies on the other side of that illusion. We have now come to the final discipline in our architectural framework. We have journeyed through a remarkable landscape of the human spirit. We laid a foundation of belief upon the bedrock of promises kept. We claimed our power as the author of our lives. We embraced the courageous path of the explorer, challenging our limits. We cultivated the mindset of the unstoppable river. We fueled our journey with the internal engine of high demand. We learned the art of inhabiting the role of our future selves. We accepted the profound responsibility of being the master gardener of our minds. We learned to set the temperature of our lives by becoming the thermostat of our standards. And most recently, we have confronted the great guardian at the gate, learning to dissolve the powerful illusion of fear. One might think that having mastered these 9 disciplines, the work is complete. Having learned to walk past the guardian of fear, we should now be free to build our magnificent life without obstruction. But there remains one final insidious enemy. It is not a loud, roaring lion like fear. It is a quiet, subtle, and deadly poison. It is a ghost in the machine that, if left unchecked, can sabotage all our previous work. It is the poison that can make a believer doubt, an author plagiarize, an explorer halt, and a warrior lay down their arms. It is the single most pervasive and destructive habit of the modern mind. This brings us to our 10th and final discipline, the poison of comparison. This discipline is placed last for a crucial reason, because comparison is the very soil from which our most potent and personal fears are reborn. The great overarching fear of not being enough, the imposter syndrome that haunts so many, is almost always nourished by the act of comparing our own journey to the journey of others. You can dissolve your fear of failure one day, only to have it completely regenerated the next by spending 10 minutes looking at someone else's curated success. Therefore, to achieve a lasting sense of peace and a sustainable drive, we must learn to immunize ourselves against this poison. Let us first understand the anatomy of this poison. Why is comparison so deeply ingrained in the human psyche? It is not a modern invention. It is an ancient, evolutionary survival software. For our ancestors, in a tribal setting, your standing relative to others was a matter of life and death. Your position in the hierarchy determined your access to resources, to safety, and to mates. Constantly scanning and comparing your status to others was a critical survival skill. The problem, as with our fear response, is that this ancient tribal software is still running on the advanced hardware of our modern lives. The context has changed entirely, but the programming remains. Today, seeing someone else succeed does not threaten your survival, and yet our brains often react as if it does, triggering feelings of anxiety, envy, and inadequacy. We must consciously choose to override this obsolete programming. The fundamental illusion of comparison is the belief that we are all running the same race. We look at the person in the lane next to us, see that they are ahead, and feel that we are losing. But this is a catastrophic misunderstanding of the nature of life. Life is not a single standardized track meet. There is no single race. There is no common finish line. Life is an infinite collection of individual journeys. Each person is on their own unique path, with their own unique terrain, their own unique timeline, and their own unique definition of success. One person is climbing a mountain, another is sailing an ocean, a third is cultivating a garden, a fourth is building a city. To stand at the base of your mountain and feel inadequate because the sailor is already halfway across the ocean is a form of madness. You are not running their race. You are not meant to. The poison of comparison is made even more potent by the great fallacy of the modern age, the fallacy of the highlight reel versus the behind the scenes. We are constantly exposed to the polished, edited, and curated final victories of others. We see the photo of the summit, but we do not see the grueling, years-long climb. We see the announcement of the successful company, but we do not see the sleepless nights, the failed prototypes, and the moments of crippling doubt. We see the perfect family portrait, but we do not see the difficult conversations and the personal sacrifices that went into it. We are comparing our raw, uncut, behind-the-scenes footage with all its struggles, mistakes, and messy realities to the final, edited, cinematic trailer of someone else's life. It is a fundamentally flawed and dishonest comparison. You are measuring your beginning against someone else's middle, or your middle against their end. It is a game you are guaranteed to lose, and it is a game that distracts you from the only work that matters, the work of your own journey. To truly understand its destructive power, let us look at the three great thefts that comparison commits against you. First, comparison steals your joy. Joy can only be experienced in the present moment. It is born from gratitude for what you have and from engagement in your own process. Comparison is a violent thief that rips you out of your present reality and transports you into a fantasy world of lack and resentment. You cannot be simultaneously grateful for the mile you ran today and envious of the marathon someone else completed. The two emotions cannot coexist. One is a state of abundance, the other is a state of scarcity. Every moment you spend in comparison is a moment you are robbed of the joy that is available to you right here, right now, in your own life. Second, comparison steals your focus. Your attention is your most valuable creative asset. The direction of your focus is the direction of your life. Every ounce of mental and emotional energy you spend looking sideways at what someone else is doing is energy that you are not investing in your own path forward. It is like trying to drive a car down a highway while staring intently into the car in the next lane. What is the inevitable result? You will drift, you will lose your momentum, and eventually you will crash. A life of greatness requires a singular, almost obsessive focus on your own journey, your own work, your own daily pages. Comparison is the great dissipator of that focus. Third, and most tragically, comparison steals your uniqueness. Your greatest gift to the world is the authentic expression of your own unique talents, perspectives, and passions. Comparison is a powerful pressure to conform. It whispers, look at them. That's what's working. You should be more like that. Your path is wrong. Your ideas are strange. Follow their formula. It encourages you to abandon your own authentic story and to start plagiarizing someone else's. It leads to a world of copies, when what the world desperately needs are more originals. The author who spends their time reading other authors' reviews instead of writing their own book will never produce a masterpiece. So, how do we immunize ourselves against this pervasive poison? We do so by committing to three practices of personal sovereignty. The first practice is the deliberate cultivation of gratitude. Gratitude is not a passive feeling, it is an active discipline. It is the direct and potent antidote to the poison of envy. Envy is the focus on what you lack. Gratitude is the focus on what you have. You must make the practice of gratitude a non-negotiable part of your mental hygiene. At the end of each day, you must deliberately identify and reflect upon the progress you have made, the blessings in your life, the small victories. This practice trains your brain to filter for abundance, not for scarcity. A mind that is deeply steeped in its own gratitude has no room for the bitterness of comparison. The second practice is the redefinition of competition. The desire to compete, to measure, is natural. The key is to channel it intelligently. You must stop participating in the flawed, external competition against others and commit to the only competition that has any true meaning, the competition against who you were yesterday. This is the only valid benchmark. Are you a little wiser today than you were yesterday? A little more disciplined, a little kinder, a little closer to the vision you have set for yourself? This is the race you can win. This transforms comparison from a destructive external act into a constructive internal one. Keep a private journal of your own progress. Track your own habits. Celebrate your own milestones. Become a connoisseur of your own growth. When you are deeply engaged in the fascinating project of outperforming your past self, you will find you have very little interest in what is happening in the lane next to you. The third practice is the conscious. Shift from comparison to admiration. This is the practice of modeling, not envying. When you see someone who has achieved something you desire, you have two choices. The path of comparison asks the question, why don't I have that? What's wrong with me? This is a question rooted in lack, and it leads to paralysis and self-pity. The path of admiration asks a different, more powerful set of questions. That is incredible. How did they do that? What was their strategy? What was their mindset? What principles did they apply? What can I learn from their journey that I can apply to my own unique path? This single shift in questioning transforms the entire dynamic. The other person is no longer a source of envy. They become a source of inspiration. They are no longer a competitor. They are a mentor, a case study, a proof of possibility. This is a mindset of abundance. It understands that another person's success does not diminish the pool of success available. It expands it by showing what can be done. Seek to learn from everyone, but seek to copy no one. When you commit to these three practices, gratitude, internal competition, and admiration, you begin to walk a sovereign path. You begin to create a life that is truly beyond compare, because it is an authentic expression of you. You become so deeply engrossed in the writing of your own story, in the exploration of your own frontiers, in the cultivation of your own garden, that the achievements of others cease to be a threat and instead become part of the rich and interesting landscape of a world full of possibility. This is the final discipline because it is the one that protects all the others. It is the act of bringing your gaze back home, back to your own foundation, your own story, your own limits, your own standards, your own mind. It is the final declaration of the architect who at last understands that the only blueprint that matters is their own. And so we have come to the end of our 10 disciplines. We have assembled the complete toolkit. We have laid the foundation, taken up the pen, explored our frontiers, cultivated unstoppability, fueled it with demands, inhabited our role, mastered our mind, set our standards, dissolved our fears, and now, finally, we have committed to walking our own unique path. All that remains is to commit, once and for all, to the magnificent work of building the masterpiece that is you. We have now reached the end of our journey together, but the beginning of the most important work of your life. We have traveled from the deepest foundations of our inner world to the outermost frontiers of our potential. We have sat in the quiet office of the architect and stood on the bustling construction site of our daily actions. And now we find ourselves at a high vantage point, a summit from which we can look back and see for the first time, not as a series of disconnected steps, but as a single, coherent, and powerful path. The purpose of this final session is not to learn a new discipline. The toolkit is complete. The 10 disciplines of the architect have been laid before you. The purpose now is one of integration. It is to move from knowledge to wisdom. It is to take the individual instruments we have studied and learn to conduct them as a single, magnificent orchestra. For the life you seek is not built by practicing one of these disciplines in isolation. It is built in the symphony of them all, playing together in harmony. We began with the central metaphor of you as the architect of your life, but now, as we conclude, we must add to that. You are not only the architect who designs the blueprint, you are also the master craftsman who picks up the tools each day. And you are, most profoundly, the living masterpiece that is being created. You are the designer, the doer, and the design itself. The masterpiece is not a building of stone and steel destined to one day crumble. The masterpiece is the living, breathing, evolving work of art that is your own character, your own contribution, your own fully realized self. So let us, from this summit, trace the path of creation one final time to see how this masterpiece comes into being. Let us synthesize the 10 disciplines into a unified philosophy for a life of intention. Our journey began where all great structures must begin, deep underground, in the unseen work of the foundation. We established the first discipline, the bedrock of belief, understanding that it is not a feeling to be wished for, but a structure to be built from the hard currency of promises kept to oneself. This foundation provides the stability to build anything of height and significance. But a foundation alone is not a home. So, upon that bedrock, we embraced our role as the author of our lives. We seized the pen from the hands of circumstance and wrote our own plot, our own vision. We rejected the passive life of the character and embraced the profound responsibility of the writer, understanding that the quality of our life's novel would be determined by the quality of our daily pages. An author writing a compelling story knows that the protagonist must grow. And so we embraced the path of the explorer, committing to the third discipline of intelligently challenging our limits. We learned to see the edge of our comfort zone not as a wall, but as a frontier. We chose the productive discomfort of the stretch over the slow decay of the comfort zone, not as a punishment to our essence, but as a curious discovery of our own potential. This explorer's path, by its very nature, guarantees resistance. And so we had to cultivate the mindset of the unstoppable river. We learned in our fourth discipline that the goal is not a fantasy of invincibility, but the resilient reality of persistence. We learned to be adaptable in our method, but unwavering in our intention, to flow around, over, and through the obstacles on our path, powered by a bias for action and a relentless focus on the next right step. This relentless forward motion required a powerful internal engine, a source of infinite fuel. We found it in our fifth discipline, the discipline of demands. We made the conscious choice to embrace the ounces of discipline over the tons of regret. We replaced the question, what is the minimum required, with what is my absolute best in this moment. We understood that this internal demand, made not for applause but for our own self-respect, is the very engine of achievement. An internal standard of excellence demands an external expression. And so, in our sixth discipline, we became the method actor, learning to inhabit the role we aspire to. We understood that we must act our way into a new identity, that the feeling of confidence is the result of courageous action, not the cause of it. We began the daily rehearsal of our future self, shaping our mindset, our physiology, and our actions to align with the person we were determined to become. For this performance to be authentic, not a hollow imitation, we had to go deeper to the source code of our reality. We entered the seventh discipline. Accepting our role as the master gardener of our mind, we understood that our mind is a fertile garden and our thoughts are the seeds. We took on the three great duties: to guard the gate against poison, to uproot the weeds of fear and doubt, and to deliberately cultivate the flowers of gratitude and possibility, knowing that our inner world creates our outer world. A garden of such significance requires a design. And so, in our eighth discipline, we established the guiding principle for the gardener's work. We became the thermostat of our standard. We stopped being a thermometer, merely reflecting the conditions around us, and we became the force that sets the conditions. We made our high standards non-negotiable, understanding that our life will not rise to the level of our hopes, but will fall to the level of what we are willing to tolerate. This courageous act of setting a higher standard inevitably awakened the guardian at the gate. And so our ninth discipline was to learn to dissolve the illusion of fear. We came to understand that fear is not an enemy to be conquered, but an outdated survival program to be managed. We learned to drag our fears into the light of definition, to dissolve them with the solvent of action, and to anchor ourselves in a purpose greater than our fear. We transformed fear from a stop sign into a compass, a reliable indicator that we are moving in the direction of our own growth. And finally, to protect this newfound freedom and courage, we immunized ourselves against the final subtle poison. In our 10th discipline, we rejected the poison of comparison. We committed to the only race that matters, the competition against who we were yesterday. We learned to shift from envy to admiration, to see the success of others not as a reflection of our own lack, but as a proof of what is possible. We brought our gaze back home to our own sovereign path. Do you see now? These are not 10 separate ideas. They are one idea expressed in 10 dimensions. They are a living, breathing system for a life of conscious creation. Your belief fuels your authorship. Your authorship demands your exploration. Your exploration requires your unstoppability. Your unstoppability is powered by your demands. Your demands are expressed through your inhabitation. Your inhabitation is made authentic by your mind. Your mind is guided by your standards. Your standards are protected by your mastery of fear. And your mastery is sustained by your rejection of comparison. It is a perfect, interconnected circle of power. This brings us to the craftsman at work. This is the daily practice. This philosophy is not a painting to be admired on a wall. It is a set of tools to be used. Your life is the block of raw, unformed marble. Every morning, You wake up and you pick up the chisel of your decisions and the hammer of your actions. Every choice you make is a strike. When you choose to keep a promise to yourself, you make a precise, skillful strike, and a chip of excess stone falls away, revealing a more defined form. When you choose to write your daily page, to take that one small, courageous action, you make another strike. When you choose to demand your best, to uphold your standard, to replace a fearful thought, you are the sculptor, engaged in the holy work of creation. Conversely, when you choose the path of least resistance, when you break a promise to yourself, when you allow mediocrity to be your guide, that too is a strike. But it is a careless, clumsy strike. It is a strike that can create a crack, that can compromise the integrity of the whole. This work is not about achieving a state of perfection. The masterpiece is never finished. A living masterpiece is always evolving, always growing, always becoming. The joy is not found in placing the final chisel strike and declaring the work done. The joy, the deep and abiding fulfillment, is found in the act of sculpting itself. It is found in the process of showing up day after day and engaging with the raw material of your own life with skill, with intention, and with love. And why? Why engage in this difficult, demanding, lifelong work? Why not choose the easy path of the thermometer, of the character, of the untended garden? You do this work not merely for the byproducts it creates, the success, the wealth, the accolades. Those things are fine, but they are not the point. You do this work to honor the unwritten contract you signed at birth. You do this work because the potential that was encoded into your very being is not a suggestion. It is a sacred obligation. The world does not need another imitation. It does not need you to be a second-rate version of someone else. The world is saturated with copies. What the world desperately needs, what it is crying out for, is your authentic, fully realized, one-of-a-kind masterpiece, the unique contribution that only you can make. Your life is your art. It is your message. It is your legacy. Not a legacy of stone monuments, but a legacy woven into the lives you touch, the problems you solve, the beauty you create, and the example you set. And so we have come full circle. We stand here now at the end of our discussion, but at the true beginning. The blueprint is clear. The tools are in your hand. The unformed marble of your future is standing before you, silent and patient, holding infinite possibility within it. The time for learning is over. The time for theory is over. The time for waiting is over. The time for building is now. The question is no longer what you are capable of, for we have established that your potential is vast. The question is no longer what the disciplines are, for they have been laid before you. The only question that remains, the question that your life in this very moment is asking of you, is this: will you begin the work? The ideas we have explored today are a single part of a much larger architectural blueprint. If you are committed to mastering not just this discipline, but all 10, I invite you to join our community of fellow architects on this journey of a lifetime. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single pillar in the structure of an unshakable life. The work is challenging, but it is the most rewarding work you will ever do. Let us build together.